Hi, Joel.
Hi. Today we are going to talk about the ancestors.
Mm.
This could be a live class,
I think we
life,
could speak.
lifelong class.
I think we could speak about it every day, right? And people love ancestors and ancestry. I think especially when you don't have connection to it, people are looking for connection. So, why don't you start talking about working with the ancestors, and we'll see where we go today. We'll have several of these conversations.
Yes. Very often we think, and that's a good place to start about our direct ancestry, right? Talking my parents, my grandparents, and the generations before me, some that I've known, some I haven't known, right? We thinking, um, let's say, with the human as the center of that. And as we go deeper in that ancestry work, and that's a good place to start, with your elders, your own elders, it's going into maybe some common roots of humanity. But before that, and you keep going, you're going to come to the plant realms and
Mhm.
the rock beings and to the earth, and then maybe to the star beings, and to the spirit of sound and the spirit of light. And so very often when that's why I say, it's such a life process, because first we need to start with our immediate relations, like we do. If you start walking with the land, you start with the land you are sitting on. That's important. You start with your immediate environment, and then you keep expanding. uh and often I feel, I do often see ancestral work. There's a lot of really good one, but there's also ancestral work that did not really ask permission or ask the ancestor what they want. One time a student of mine asked, say, "Oh, I want to do, a ceremony for my ancestor." And we talked about ceremony last week, but I want to do a ritual for my ancestor. And I said, "That's great. That's beautiful." And she was telling me about the ritual, and asked her why she wanted to do it. So she wanted to connect more with them and things like that. And I said, "Did you ask them what they want?"
Mhm.
Because she assumed, because of her background and her family lineage, that this would be the right one. And sometimes it is the case. Maybe you have a grandmother that told you, "Hey, in our family, we have been honoring our ancestors for thousands of years that way." And in indigenous community, that's very common. People know how to take care of their ancestors, and they are in constant communication. But if we come from a background that's been unrooted from their land, unrooted from their tradition, and there is broken lineages of traditions, we have first to turn towards them and spend time listening about what they want. Because maybe they are going to ask you to plant a certain tree. Maybe they ask you to prepare a certain food that were traditional food. Maybe they are going to ask you to bring certain songs, certain instruments, certain music, that connects to them. So I think it's really important as we step into ancestral work. I would tell people always first ask them what they want. Obviously, I would not say that to my teacher, someone that's coming from an indigenous lineage, because they know what they want, right? They are in communication. But if you're trying to develop that communication, the first step is really sitting in silence and in prayer. And you can do even a vision quest, do some kind of traditional setting where you just go in silence for a few days in nature. You're fasting, you're, kind of giving something from your life with the intention to get that connection. And as it's open, then you start nurturing that connection.
Yeah, beautiful. I think it, ties into a little bit of what we talked about last week. Like, it's not about you, if you're working with your ancestors, it's not you working with them, it's you inviting them, right? So it's going to involve them, whether they're trees, clouds, rain, or human. It involves an interaction. And I think that's a such an important thing to open ourselves to, that when you're approaching beings, as Angel and I have been taught, it is about relationship
Mm.
and about a reciprocal relationship. So when you're invoking or calling, doing something for the ancestors, you have to ask them. They're part of it, you know, so allow them to have their viewpoint, their wants, their desires. You know, I see a lot of people spin out when they're like, well, I don't know. You know, I come from a broken lineage. I don't know what my ancestors, and then they get stuck there, right? So I always go first, you know, in my teachings of go to the elements, go to the thing that all ancestors have, you know, past and future, hopefully future, if we're still around, will have. And that's, you know, the four elements. And what do we always gather around? Fire. Go talk to fire, go sit with fire, you know, as because fire teaches relationships. Fire can't just start, you know, it has wood, you know, that's tree people, right? It has rock, it has stone people, right? So just sitting around a fire teaches you about it takes more than one to create relationship. And so just going to fire as an element and is also something where people gather and tell stories, right? Is a way to start saying, what do you want? How do you want? Right? How do I approach you? And how can I approach fire, right? That has been lit in ritual circles and ceremonies for since the beginning of humans, you know, how can I be with this? And you know, in a time where we're seeing heat rising around the globe and fire seasons, it's a great time to sit with that element of what happens when it is out of bounds, when it is out of relationship, right? Versus when it's in relationship. And that's the same with ancestors. What happens when you're out of relationship with them, out of bounds? What happens, right? You can get stuck in your own, I don't know, and what am I supposed to do? And that, or when you're in bounds, that means you're bringing them in to have that discussion. And then you're all working around that fire, feeding that fire, speaking into that fire, nurturing that fire, making sure, right, that it has that energy of those four elements at all times.
Mm. Yeah, and the fire. I mean, my teacher always say, any question you can always bring into the fire because these are, most ancient, one of our most ancient ancestor, and he's seen it all. He remembers it all. So he will have that wisdom. And I like, personally, I like to keep my ritual very simple and to keep them very grounded. Sometimes it's time to make very complex rituals, but I think most of the time when we're trying to have a connection and one-on-one with a certain ancestors or kind of really connect to something, it's good to do something very, very simple. And
Yeah.
one day I was, wanted to connect more with my ancestors, and I've been working with them for a long time. And I was expecting them to, give me some kind of really interesting and complex rituals. And they were like, we want you to prepare a dish with chestnut flour because my ancestor used to eat a lot of chestnut flour and make cakes with it. And so I kind of dig the internet and talked to my family, found this old recipe that probably my great 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 grandmothers were preparing. And I made that, and I decided to completely fast for a few days and just eat that meal. And I
Mhm.
started to have those really powerful dreams and visions about how my ancestor lived, how they connected to spirit. My ancestor lived in the mountain. They were very solitary, and how they were connected to the mountain and to the rocks and to the forest and to the rivers. So through that wisdom of the chestnut tree that had a deep relationship with my ancestors, the chestnut tree remember that. Right? The chestnut tree came to teach me. Right? So that was the teacher, that was the bridge into my ancestors. Right. So I think, that's sometimes a way to think about, we don't know who is going to be the teacher, and it can be the fire, it could be a
Mhm.
tree, it could be a stone, it could be a little piece of land. I have a student that went back to Europe to his ancestral land that his family left 4 generations ago. and literally was guided into his own village to the right house, which he didn't know was the house of his ancestor, and discovered that when he was there. And with permission, he brought back a little piece of the ground, of the soil, of the land, and brought it back to his home where he lives here in the United States. And he has this on his altar. And his connection is that little vibration piece of the land, right? So I'm just putting that out there because there are so many ways that we can bring a sacred object, an artifact, or it can be purely from the spiritual realms, the teaching that's coming through the ceremonies, through prayer rituals, right? But to sometimes, be open to the unexpected way ancestor might show up in our life if we ask them to teach us, if we, show us how to do that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And it always helps if you put an altar to invite them in,
Yes.
Beautiful. So much. Thanks so much, Angel.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.